Hello and welcome to Video Revealed. I'm Agent Smith. If you've ever wanted a compressed video format that looks as close to reality as possible, that's QuickTime ProRes. This is the QuickTime Resurrection. All right, I got to take these glasses off because I can't see a thing. All right, so a lot of things to unpack in this, starting with the amazing background. This is an abandoned psych hospital in St. Thomas, Ontario, and I'm going to have a link to abandoned Ontario places. This is someone who goes into abandoned buildings and shoots amazing shots of these. I'm a huge fan. I don't know why, but I just love abandoned buildings. And I thought it did well for a post-apocalyptic background. Also, that amazing typeface that you saw at the beginning was from Arcana Foundry. And you can get 15% off any of their fonts. And lots of these were developed for the actual films. And of course, Resurrections is there. And you can see there's two different R's using open type so that they don't look the same. They even have, look at this, it's the heptapods. They actually have the heptapod language in here. So check them out. Links are in the description for them. All right, so let me tell you why I use the term resurrections. Because, well, first of all, only recently has full Apple-supported QuickTime ProRes been added to Premiere Pro. And that's a huge, important thing. That's what we're going to look at. But also the new ProRes format on iPhones, which is going to cause a lot of headaches to consumers because they have no idea how much bigger QuickTime ProRes is. So we're going to have a look at what QuickTime ProRes is. What are some good uses for it? Where do you find it in Premiere Pro? How I use it. And we're also going to hear from some Adobe professionals. These are folks that I know very well that I asked them to give us their thoughts on ProRes and how it's emerged. So you're going to hear about how it's used in Hollywood and broadcast and also from engineering. All right, so let's talk about the fact that ProRes was created many, many years ago, and it's an excellent high-quality format. But since then, things like H.264, 265, YouTube, the web, and that's no place for QuickTime because QuickTime is a giant file format. So the first thing I want to point out is the fact that so many new users are going to experiment and they'll be surprised at how much larger it is. It's immensely larger, but the quality is incredible. Now, here's the thing. If you're looking at the final version of a QuickTime export and an H.264 export on an 8-bit laptop with your own eyes, you probably won't see much of a difference. That's because H.264 was designed to be compressed and to throw away what the human eye doesn't see. So it throws away a huge amount of color information. We don't see it, so we think it's just fine and we use it on the web and things like that. The problem is if you try to reuse H.264 or 5 over and over and over again and recompress and export it, you're going to have problems. It's not a good format for that. So we'll get into a little bit of that. A couple of other things I want to point out is playing it back, and this is going to be a huge issue for some folks. The QuickTime format, ProRes format, is a professional format. So it's not meant to be a desktop playback format. On the Apple environment, you're probably fine. But if you're thinking of sharing it to your friends, then they'll probably have trouble playing it. The whole idea here is not to have a format you play on the desktop. It's a format to re-edit, reuse, composite, and use in After Effects, in Premiere Pro, or anywhere else. You can use it in Resolve or Avid. So it's not going to play back. I'm going to play this on the desktop using QuickLook for Windows. I'll put a link in the description. If you're a Mac user, you already know about QuickLook. You click on something, you hit the space bar, and you get a preview of it. And that's not something that Windows has. It's an extra free third-party thing that I load. And the cool thing is you can actually preview QuickTime 444 on the desktop with QuickLook. It's amazing. The other thing is transparency. And I have a whole tutorial about creating transparency with two formats, WebM and QuickTime. And the problem is that a lot of people don't listen to my tutorial and they create WebM because it's small, and then they try to import it back into Premiere Pro. And the transparency is not supported in Premiere Pro. It's for HTML5 applications, the browser, it's for OBS and streaming and things like that. So if you want to have transparency back into Premiere Pro from something like After Effects, then QuickTime is an amazing choice. All right, so let's go have a look at what QuickTime is. All right, so let's ProRes. And I always say QuickTime and I really mean ProRes. So let's look exactly at what ProRes is. So this is all from Apple's white paper, which I'll have a link to. It's a codec technology developed for high quality, high performance editing. So it's one of the choices you get when you're making a video, a codec, compressor, decompressor. Apple has licensed ProRes to select companies for use in specific products and workflows. Now, one of these select companies was not Adobe until recently. ProRes was not something you could use on Windows. You could on the Mac because it was part of the operating system. So who are these select companies? Well, have a look at this. It's everybody. This is one page, and you can see Adobe at the top, but Airy, Red, Blackmagic, everybody. So the whole industry is based on QuickTime. Everybody is using QuickTime out there. It's just everywhere. Now there are different versions of ProRes, and we'll go through what these are. ProRes 444 XQ, 444, 422 HQ, 422, 422 LT, and 422 Proxy. Premiere Pro supports all of these right inside exporting out of Premiere Pro and Media Encoder. That's what's important. So 444 XQ is the highest quality version. It includes an alpha channel, which is the transparency. That's why there are four numbers, 4444. The last number is transparency. It will handle high dynamic range, 12 bits per channel. So that means that each of the channels of video is 12 bits, and the alpha supports up to 16 bits per channel. That means that the alpha channel, the transparency, can have the highest quality for things like motion blur and blurs and just movement, so that you're not having any kind of jagged edges on that. And it's great for visual effects. 444 is extremely high. So it's just a little bit less, but again, it's extremely high. It includes an alpha channel. It's 12 bits per channel, great for mastering. So this is a format that someone would be using for mastering the final output. And whenever you master something at the highest quality, that means you can spit out a lower quality all the way down to something like H.264. 422 HQ, this is a higher data rate version of 422, which we'll look at in a second. It preserves the visual quality at the same high level as 4444. So it's almost as good as the higher quality one. So that's good to know. Now, this is the one I use, and it is the most popular one. It's now just called High Quality Compressed Codec. The intro to my show, the intro to this QuickTime thing that I made in After Effects, I exported out as 422, and it looks just like the original. It's almost the same as 422 HQ, but only 66% of the data rate. This is really huge. The data rate is how much data needs to flow into whatever your player application is or Premiere Pro. How much data does it have to flow? So this is 66% of the higher quality. The most used version out there, and is excellent for motion graphics, openings, and things like that. And here's what's really cool. My C100 is capturing in 422 from 420. What the heck does that mean? That's chroma sampling. So 444 means you're not subsampling any of the chroma. The way that video is based is that the first channel is really the black and white version of it, and that's where we can see. But what we can't see are the two other channels of color, so that we can start throwing those away and not miss it. That's where the 2 comes from instead of the 4. 422 instead of 444. We're not going to see that visually. But what's cool about my C100 is if I record directly to a card internally, it's 420. But what I'm doing is I'm recording the HDMI out over to my Ninja, Atomos Ninja, that records 422 at a higher quality. So the HDMI output of my C100 is actually better, captured as QuickTime 422 externally on this recorder. That makes a huge difference. It increases the quality of my system. And actually, the Ninja can record RAW, not on the C100, but on tons of different cameras, QuickTime RAW. It's amazing. Now, let's look at ProRes 422 LT, which is more compressed than 422, great for limited storage, low data rate, and it's used a lot in feature film editing, which is a really important fact. If you think that someone editing a feature film is sitting there with 4K, 6K, 8K in a desktop, they're not. They're editing ProRes LT. Very, very compressed format so that they can composite multiple tracks together and it plays back like butter. That's what's great about this format. It's not for final work. So you would not use 422 for final. Since then, Apple created ProRes 422 Proxy, which is even more highly compressed, intended for offline workflows, very low data rate, not for final either. So this is a great format, and some cameras actually will write a proxy, a ProRes proxy, while they're recording the original. And so you can link up the two. You can edit the proxy and have it swap out using like Premiere Pro's proxy workflow. So let's look at the data rates. And this is, again, from the white paper, which I'll link to. So this is comparing. The dark blue is uncompressed format. So on the left, this is 444 uncompressed, 12-bit. And you can see it's 2,237 megabits per second. So if you look at ProRes 444 without an alpha, it's 495. ProRes 444 is 330. So a huge difference in the amount of throughput. There's no way you're going to edit uncompressed. That's the bar that Apple is setting here. Well, if uncompressed is the exact full frame, no compression version, then what do these compare to? And they almost look exactly the same. For you and me, they're going to look exactly the same, but a massive difference. Now on the 422 side, 1,326 megabits per second for uncompressed 10-bit 422. 422 HQ 220. The one I use, 422, 147, and then we can see LT and proxy versions here. So that's how much information is passing through whatever system you're using, whether it's in Premiere Pro or what have you. So here's the trade-off. The highly compressed formats are way smaller. I'll show you an example of an export in a second. But they require a lot of CPU power to playback because you have to decompress this compressed format just to be able to see it. And H.264 is massively compressed. You pay for that by CPU decode. QuickTime is going to play a lot better even on an underpowered system. The problem is a lot of consumers will just freak out. All of a sudden, they need hundreds of gigabytes for what they would need, 1 gigabyte before in playback. So they think something's wrong, and it's not. You're just not compressing it as much. All right, let's go look at what I have in Premiere Pro. So there's that same opening, which is a QuickTime file. And if we look at that, if I right-click on this and choose Properties, down at the bottom, you'll see the QuickTime details of this, and it shows the size and the format. All I did was choose 422 right out of After Effects, and it made the file. So I've got my matrix edit here with a bunch of clips. Okay, so what I also want to show you in the sequence settings, let me make sure I'm in here. What we're going to come across a lot of is these choices right here. Rec 2100, HLG, and 2100 PQ. Premiere Pro now supports high dynamic range timelines. It didn't for the longest time. It only allowed a color working space of Rec 709, which is what broadcast is, HD broadcast. But now if you're watching things like Disney Plus and you see that HD 10 come up, that means that you're watching high dynamic range, and the difference is amazing. But this does bring up an important fact. What I don't want you to think is that, well, gee, all I have to do is shoot something on a non-HDR camera and turn on HDR here and it's HDR. No, this is only for high dynamic range, that the original was shot with a high dynamic range. But when I show you the formats in QuickTime, those output formats will come up because it's a way for Premiere Pro to create a QuickTime ProRes format that's exactly tied to the correct color space. Really useful. Okay, right now this is just Rec 709. So just like any format, when you're exporting out, the formats here, there's a ProRes up here at the top, MXF OP1A. And if we go to the presets in here, you'll see the same kinds of presets, 422 HQ, 422 proxy, all of the same flavors. But why are they MXF? Well, MXF is a broadcast format. When you're sitting down and watching cable television, that's not playing from a tape, that's playing from a server. And those servers need a format that they will ingest that is compatible. And they're almost all MXF formats. So this is a way to take QuickTime, wrap it in MXF, stick it in those servers, and it plays back. Again, great quality. Usually you'll go down to QuickTime here, and that's where you'll get to all of these formats. Now, at the top, the first one is match source re-wrap. All this does is take the source and wrap it in a .mov export, which is very useful. But I think it's better. Here's what I always use, 422. And you just pick it and you leave everything else alone. So you can see the width and height and frame rate, all of this is taking the settings from that sequence, not from the media in the sequence, from the sequence. So this sequence was made 1920, 1080, 25 frames per second. And that's what's going to be exported out. Of course, I can override that and change that to whatever I want. I want to show you same file exported out. Look at the difference in size. So this is 4444. All of these are 1080, 1920, 1080. But this is 4444, and it's 2.78 gigabytes. 422 HQ, 1.89. 422, we're already down here at half the size at 1.2 gigabytes. LT, 840. And then this is what YouTube would be at H.264, 182 megabytes. So remember I mentioned QuickLook? I'll select this and tap the space bar, and I'm playing back QuickTime 4444 on the desktop with QuickTime. QuickLook. And I'll go down one. There's the 422 version. Looks fantastic. Okay, so to show you where these exports are, I'm going to show you in Media Encoder because we get little tooltips that pop up when we look at the formats. And I think this is really useful. This will help you when you're trying to pick which is the correct format. Like I said, most of the time I'm just using 422. If I need transparency, then I just use 444. I don't shoot any HDR, but if you do, then you'll want to use something else. All right, so in Media Encoder, down in the presets here, when you open those up, by the way, if this opens up with everything open, if you hold the Alt key on Windows, Option on Mac, close it, then take your finger off the key and open it, it collapses all of them. This thing shows every format. So if you look in the other format down here and mouse over, here's 422 HQ. Remember, we saw that in the slides, ProRes 422 HQ, but then there's HLG. So where the heck is that? Well, that's the color space that Premiere Pro is tagging this to. So you can see it says ProRes 422 based on the source. So again, based on the source. But down at the bottom, look, it says color space is set to 2100, Rec 2100 HLG, and there's the PQ version, Rec 2100 PQ. So you can see there's a lot of similarities to what Adobe and Apple does. The difference here is Adobe adds the color space on top of it. So whether you're using 422 for HDR or not. And then down at the bottom, there's just some more HD versions, and there's some more, again, these are more broadcast formats. You can also just come up to the search and type in QuickTime. And I'll open that up so we can see. So there's a bunch, that's in the Adobe stock format. So this is if you're creating something for Adobe stock. Here's the broadcast formats, 422, and you don't see any HLG on that or PQ. Cineform is also another format. This is GoPro's format. DV, stay away from that, and then there's that other format down there. So not only are these available finally on the Windows side, which was a huge thing for me. I could not believe it the first time I looked in that export menu and thought, oh, this is so great. Now I don't have to guess on formats and what is going to be the best. You know what? 422, boom. Oh, 444 if I need an alpha channel, and I'm off to the races. So it's just great having this option. Now, what I wanted to do was reach out to my buddies at Adobe who deal with QuickTime ProRes with their customers all the time, from Hollywood to engineering to broadcast. So let's hear from 3 of my buddies at Adobe, and I asked them how they're using QuickTime, what are some important things, and what you'll hear with all of them is this reuse, being able to reuse something with low compression or no problems, no artifacts. And then I also threw in there, when was the first time you saw QuickTime? Because it was revolutionary where it came out. So let's listen to our my buddies from Adobe.
Thank you, Colin. As I was thinking about QuickTime and the ProRes format, I remembered back to sometime in 2009 when Apple had just come out with Final Cut 7. And as part of their marketing, they were doing a world tour. And they were going around to a few major cities and putting on a presentation showing off all of the new features in Final Cut Studio. I was a film student in LA at the time, but I was able to go to the event. And one of the things that I still remember, because I'm a nerd about this kind of thing, was they were showing off ProRes Proxy. And so they had this video with a lot of confetti falling against the sky, and they showed it in uncompressed, and it looked great, and then they showed it in this new ProRes Proxy. And they were showing off how little compression artifacts there were, and then, a side-by-side showing off the file size. And that was the really amazing part. And because, like I said, I'm a codec nerd like that, that always stuck out to me as a kind of big highlight of that release and that demo. And I've been nothing but impressed with ProRes since then. Slowly but surely, it has continued to spread through the market, and it's become a de facto standard for editorial and delivery. In my work as a finishing editor, I would say easily 75% of the deliverables I've had to do have been in ProRes. And then of course, in my work on the Premiere Pro team at Adobe, I remember how excited we were to work with Apple to bring the true official ProRes encoding to Windows, right? As a big step forward for that format as well. And then of course, recently with the new iPhones that can record in ProRes, and with ProRes RAW coming to other recorders, the format continues to grow and continues to be adopted. And then for me too, the really exciting part on the editorial side is with the new M1 Pro, Max, and Ultra chips. They have the dedicated ProRes decode and encode right there on the chip. So when you consider all of that, plus the dominance of the QuickTime format overall, and how it became the base container for the MP4 file format, it's incredible how much the positive impact Apple has had and continues to have on the post-production community.
Well, the first time I saw QuickTime in use probably dates back to when a lot of Macs were actually still dealing with monochrome monitors. I worked for Apple during the period from like 95 until about 1997. And while there were plenty of color Macs going on, there was a lot of the Performa lineup, the Power Macs. I worked on Power Mac 8500s back in the day. QuickTime was just already kind of an established thing at that point. And anytime you were trying to look at or see video, it was always using QuickTime. I think the time where it really resonated with me that this was the future, this was the new way of things, was when the first Star Wars Episode 1 trailer dropped, and everybody was clamoring to get online to download a copy of it, watch it again, watch it a second time, and that was where I think it really hit sort of a mainstream idea. This predated YouTube, it predated most streaming formats. So the only way you could get it was as a progressive download as a QuickTime file. And, I think that really showcased, where we were headed in the world of video on the desktop. One of the things that really amped up the use of QuickTime in a professional space was obviously the introduction of a codec like ProRes. I think a lot of people forget that, digital editing on the computer used to be a really lossy environment. If you took your, DV footage that might have been in a QuickTime wrapper, but it was using the older DV codec, if you brought it in and edited something, output it back to the same format, then brought it in again, did some more editing, output it back again, you are oftentimes seeing the video getting softer and softer and softer. DV being a very lossy codec, it was one of those things. I think a lot of people understood it at the time because there were still so many people that were still editing on tape, and anytime you move from one tape to the next tape, you're getting a generation of loss in the quality of the signal, and eventually people's faces start looking really washed and smoothed out, and it just starts looking unacceptable. It used to be a lot of the broadcasters had specifications on how many generations of tape loss you could go through before they would reject the file. And digital suffered from that as well. Nobody had the storage space or the hardware, the horsepower to run in an uncompressed realm. And when ProRes hit the market, it really changed things, because even though ProRes is a slightly lossy codec, it's a size that's just perfect for people had the ability to store it, people had the ability to edit it, and you could go in and out of an editing project multiple times before you would really start to see any type of generational loss. Even though it is lossy and you will see some loss, it's very robust. It can withstand a lot of editing. It can withstand a lot of export and import back in. And because of that, it just got widely adopted across the industry. I think one of the big moments was when we started to see camera makers actually have the option to record directly in a ProRes format. And that was one of the things that really cemented QuickTime as the tool of choice in Hollywood. It was gave the ability to, continually edit something, know that the quality was going to be maintained, and also just know that, everybody could read a ProRes file. It became sort of like a compatibility standard, and that was one of the reasons it was adopted.
Thanks, Colin. No question for film workflows that if you had to pick a single codec to record and master in, it would be ProRes. We pretty much see it everywhere in film. Also, pretty safe to say we see it very similar for broadcast workflows when there's lots of compositing and creative work that needs to be done for any particular edit. And we're seeing more and more of these complex edits that are very film looking on television, of course, and even on the web and social media. Because remember, a lot of the video is being exported by various apps, whether it's for effects or color passes, and a lot of things get layered on. And you always have to be concerned about generational loss as this video might move around, this asset might move around. And with ProRes, you don't really have to worry with that. It's always held up well. One of the most popular media formats that we see today is H.264 and now HEVC, right? These .mp4 files. And I think we can all agree that this format was never really meant to be editing on a timeline, but it's grown in popularity from all sorts of devices, as we know, from DSLR, drone, and obviously mobile phones and other devices. And this format works fine for quick edits, real simple things that you need to do on the timeline. But as I had just mentioned, edits are getting more complex and more filmic looking. So you need to transcode a lot of these different formats that come from these mobile devices, and typically the ones that I mentioned, into ProRes. I always recommend ProRes Proxy or ProRes LT, because for most .mp4 files, those are lightweight files. And again, typically, I know we can get into some higher end modes of those. ProRes just holds up well. You won't see any real generational loss, if at all. You'll also have the advantage of smoother timeline scrubbing. For our applications, we've done a ton of work to make sure that ProRes is very responsive for both Mac and Windows, because remember that we do license ProRes from Apple for the Windows platform to really give you that cross-platform ability. But it is a great codec for any sort of transcoding, and I would always recommend that you use ProRes for any long form or documentary work, especially when you have a lot of mixed media. The other thing that's also great to point out that a lot of our customers are using QuickTime ProRes or Apple ProRes is that they want to take advantage of smart rendering. So for those audience members that don't know smart rendering, we essentially take any chunks of media, ProRes, that's on the timeline, and if they're unchanged, so you haven't done any color work at any particular frames, or you haven't, none of the frames have changed from the time that they were imported or placed on the timeline, we can just copy large chunks out to the export, and it makes things really fast because there's no additional calculations needed by the CPU or GPU. So again, a lot of customers are using it for transcoding, and they're using it for smart rendering, and great response on the timeline. The first time I saw QuickTime, seems like yesterday to me. This was probably around 1990 or so, and Apple was doing a presentation on what they were calling multimedia. This is really the first time we heard that term. And as I recall, it was a VHS tape that was digitized, and it was The Little Mermaid. It was a 160 by 120 pixel video, very small postage stamp video. That was certainly all we had, for the first few years. But after I saw that, it was easy to see where this was going and how quick it was going to move. It had so many places where you could use this. And in 1991, I remember just months later, I got my first copy of Premiere, and this is my actual box, and it actually required a Super Mac card called a Video Spigot, and I've held on to these because it pretty much defined my my career after I saw this. And just so you know, I also mentioned this board only has one port because it just recorded video and you needed a separate device. It was a serial device called a Mac recorder to actually capture the audio in a second pass. So you had to actually record them twice to get them in. But things really started to pick up for QuickTime when Radius introduced what was known as Video Vision Studio. You know, the boards got bigger and we got, you know, some pretty professional at the time S-video and composite breakout boards, and later on we got component, of course. But this started to change everything because QuickTime was making video editing, which of course was a new term, available at a very affordable price. It was easy to configure. You would just buy, you know, a Mac with a NUBUS slot in there, go ahead and put the board in there. And this became the de facto standard. Video Vision and Premiere, and of course After Effects a year or two later. For any kind of creative work on a lot of TV shows, you'd see the openers were all done with Photoshop, After Effects, and Premiere with a Video Vision. A lot of cartoons were done in the early and mid 90s. And of course, you know, Avid at the same time was also contributing to QuickTime and quickly changing the entire broadcast workflow. And of course, many years later, got into film. So yeah, I mean, a lot of us that saw this back certainly in 1990 and that era just remember it fondly.
So there you go. That's the word from the guys at Adobe that are using this format all the time. It's a staple in Hollywood. It's a staple in broadcast. It's constantly being worked on at Adobe. We're going to see more great things like the HDR support that's already in Premiere Pro and going out to QuickTime ProRes. It's just a fantastic thing. I want to tell you, the first time I saw QuickTime was in the early 1990s, and somebody got a hold of a video that was made on the Apple campus in Cupertino. They used to have an ice cream truck that came out for the staff. So somebody ran out there at the time with like a little handy cam, and they recorded saying hi to the truck owner and serving ice cream. And then they compressed it, and it was a file you could play on your computer. And of course, all you young folks, you grew up with video on everything. This is before we even knew you could put video on a computer. You couldn't. It was 160. I'll put that. This is an HD frame. I'll put that. Let me just put that right over there. Right over there. So this is 160 pixels by 120 pixels. That's how big the video was. And we were playing it back at that time on a 19-inch CRT screen. And it was, 30, 40 seconds long. And we probably played it 50 times. We just couldn't believe our eyes because it meant that there was a revolution coming with video on the desktop. And as you heard from Dave, all the things that he was showing with those cards, I think that card he showed you at the time was $10,000. And it was 640 by 480 interlaced video. So let me get back to Agent Smith. Hey, if you're new to Video Revealed and you like what you saw, then take a moment and subscribe. I highly advise it. If you want to support Video Revealed more, you can do that on VideoRevealed.com/shop. Donate once, monthly. You can buy a bunch of stuff on there, and we even give you some free things. So if you're looking for a compressed video format, indistinguishable from reality, red pill, blue pill, now you know what to choose.